There are monsters in every culture. Every civilization that has ever existed has its darkness, its demons, its things that lurk beyond the edge of the known world, waiting. But there is one name, two names, that appear not in one culture, not in two, but in three of the greatest traditions in human history. In the oldest books of the Bible, in the sacred verses of the Quran, in the chronicles of Alexander the Great, the most powerful conqueror the ancient world had ever seen. Gog and Magog. Who or what are they? Are they a people, a nation, a force of nature, a prophecy waiting to be fulfilled? For 3,000 years, kings and scholars, prophets and generals, cartographers and conquerors have all asked the same question. And for 3,000 years, no one has given a definitive answer. Tonight, we go looking for one. We will travel through the pages of the Bible, across the battlefields of Alexander the Great, deep into Islamic tradition, and into the darkest corners of medieval maps where cartographers wrote, in trembling ink, the words that terrified entire civilizations. Here live Gog and Magog. This is the story of the greatest mystery in the ancient world, and it begins not with a monster, but with a wall. Before we can understand what Gog and Magog became, we must first understand what they were. The name appears for the first time in recorded history in the book of Genesis, a genealogy, a list of nations descended from Noah after the great flood. Among the sons of Japheth, Noah's third son, there is a name, Magog. Just a name, no description, no story, no warning. But names in ancient texts are never just names. They are identities. They are destinies. In the ancient world, a nation's name was its nature. And Magog, scholars have debated for 3 millennia, referred to a real people, a real place, somewhere beyond the borders of the known world. The earliest historical records point to the lands north and east of the ancient Near East, the steppes of Central Asia, the vast, freezing plains that stretched beyond the Caucasus Mountains, a place so remote, so wild, so beyond the reach of civilization that the ancient world simply called it the land of the barbarians. And the people who lived there? Fierce, nomadic, unstoppable on horseback. They swept down from the north in waves that ancient civilizations could not predict and could not stop. The Scythians, the Cimmerians, the Huns, peoples whose names still carry the echo of terror across thousands of years. This, many historians believe, is where Gog and Magog were born. Not as supernatural monsters, but as the very real, very human terror of the unknown north. But then the prophets got hold of the name, and everything changed. It is 593 BCE. The city of Jerusalem has fallen. The temple has been destroyed. The Jewish people have been dragged into exile in Babylon, the greatest catastrophe in their history. And in the midst of this darkness, a prophet named Ezekiel begins to have visions. Not small visions, not quiet whispers from God. Terrifying, cosmic, earth-shattering visions of the end of all things. In chapters 38 and 39 of the book of Ezekiel, God speaks directly about what is coming, and what is coming has a name, Gog, of the land of Magog. The vision is precise and devastating. Gog will come from the far north, leading a vast coalition of nations. He will descend upon the land of Israel like a storm, like a cloud covering the earth. He will bring with him armies from Persia, from Ethiopia, from Libya, from the remotest parts of the north. And God will let him come, not because God has abandoned his people, but because Gog's destruction will be so total, so complete, so unmistakably divine, that all the nations of the earth will finally know who is God. The battle that follows in Ezekiel's vision is unlike anything in human history. Earthquakes, fire, brimstone raining from the sky, the mountains themselves collapsing, every wall falling, every army destroyed. Gog's forces will be so completely annihilated that it will take the people of Israel 7 months just to bury all the bodies. 7 years to burn all the weapons left on the battlefield. 7 months, 7 years. Think about the scale of what Ezekiel was describing, but Ezekiel was only the beginning. Centuries later, the book of Revelation, the final book of the Christian Bible, returns to Gog and Magog one last time. And this time, the stakes are even higher. After 1,000 years of peace, Satan is released from his prison. He goes out to deceive the nations, Gog and Magog, gathering them for the final battle. They march across the breadth of the earth. They surround the city of God, and then fire comes down from heaven and consumes them. The final battle, the end of history, the last war, and at the center of it all, Gog and Magog. For 3,000 years, theologians and scholars have argued about what this means. Who is Gog? Where is Magog? Is this a literal prophecy or a symbolic vision? The arguments have never been resolved, but one thing is certain. Whatever Gog and Magog represent, they represent the ultimate threat, the final enemy, the darkness that comes before the dawn of a new world. Now we leave the realm of prophecy and enter the realm of conquest. 323 BCE. Alexander the Great has just died in Babylon at the age of 32, having conquered more of the known world than any human being before or since. From Greece to Egypt, from Persia to the borders of India, an empire stretching across 3 continents. But in the centuries after his death, legends began to grow around Alexander, stories that went far beyond the historical record, stories that turned a Greek conqueror into something almost mythological. And in almost every version of these legends, the same story appears. Alexander, at the edge of the world, encountered something terrifying beyond the northern mountains. A people so savage, so destructive, so utterly beyond civilization that even Alexander, the greatest conqueror in history, could not defeat them. So he did something else. He built a wall. The legends vary in their details but agree on their essence. Alexander traveled to the Caucasus Mountains, the great mountain range between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, and there, in a narrow mountain pass, he constructed a massive gate of iron and brass, a barrier between the civilized world and the chaos beyond. The Alexander Romance, a collection of legends about Alexander compiled in the 3rd century CE, describes the peoples beyond the wall in chilling detail. They ate the dead, they drank blood. They were beyond all human reason and restraint. Their names, Gog and Magog. The story spread across the ancient world with astonishing speed. It was translated into Syriac, Armenian, Arabic, Persian, Ethiopian, and dozens of other languages. It was told in Christian monasteries and Islamic courts. It was painted on church walls and written into royal chronicles. The image of Alexander's iron wall, the last barrier between civilization and apocalypse, became one of the most powerful images in the medieval imagination. But did the wall actually exist? Remarkably, there is real archaeological evidence of massive ancient walls in the Caucasus region. The Derbent Wall in modern-day Dagestan, Russia. The Gorgan Wall in modern-day Iran. Enormous ancient defensive structures built to keep something, or someone, out. Were these Alexander's wall? Almost certainly not. Most predate or post-date Alexander's campaigns. But they are real. They are massive. And they were built by civilizations who were genuinely terrified of what lay beyond them. Sometimes legends grow from real fear, and sometimes that fear is justified. We now turn to the 3rd great tradition, and perhaps the most detailed account of all. In the 18th chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Kahf, the chapter of the cave, there is a remarkable story. a story that has fascinated Islamic scholars for 14 centuries and continues to generate debate to this very day. God speaks of a man called Dhul-Qarnayn, the two-horned one. Who was Dhul-Qarnayn? Islamic tradition has long connected him to Alexander the Great, though this identification is debated among scholars. What is clear is that Dhul-Qarnayn was a great and righteous ruler, given power by God to travel to the ends of the earth. He traveled to the west, where the sun sets. He traveled to the east, where the sun rises. And then he traveled between the two mountain barriers, to a place at the edge of the known world. There he found a people who could barely speak his language. They came to him desperate, terrified, pleading, and they said, "O Dhul-Qarnayn, indeed, Gog and Magog are corrupters in the land. So may we assign to you an expenditure so that you might make between us and them a barrier." They were offering everything they had, every piece of gold and silver, every resource, every labor, just to be protected. Dhul-Qarnayn agreed, but he refused their payment. Instead, he asked them for something else: their labor, their manpower, their hands. What followed was one of the greatest construction projects in the history of the ancient world. Massive blocks of iron filled the space between the two mountains. Then, molten copper poured over the iron, sealing every gap, every crack, every weakness. The barrier was complete. And then Dhul-Qarnayn made a statement that has echoed through Islamic theology for 14 centuries. "This is a mercy from my Lord. But when the promise of my Lord comes, he will make it level. And the promise of my Lord is ever true." In other words, the barrier is not permanent. It was never meant to be permanent. It is a mercy, a delay, a holding back of something that will eventually be released. Islamic tradition is specific about what happens when the barrier finally breaks. Gog and Magog will pour out in vast numbers. They will drink every river and lake dry. They will consume everything in their path. They will be so numerous that their vanguard reaches the sea of the east, while their rearguard has not yet left the land of the west. They will be stopped only by divine intervention. But where is this barrier? Islamic scholars have debated this question for 14 centuries. The Caucasus Mountains, Central Asia, the Far East, even beneath the earth. Nobody has found it, and some scholars argue, perhaps that is exactly the point. 3 traditions, 3 accounts, 1 wall. The question that has haunted explorers, archaeologists, and historians for centuries is devastatingly simple. Did it actually exist? The answer, remarkably, might be yes. Not 1 wall, but many walls, built across centuries, across thousands of miles, by different civilizations, all for the same terrifying reason. Let us start with the most extraordinary, the Derbent Wall. Standing in the city of Derbent in modern-day Dagestan, Russia, on the western shore of the Caspian Sea. A massive ancient wall stretching from the mountains to the sea, blocking the narrow coastal pass that was for centuries the only viable route between the steppes of the north and the civilizations of the south. It is one of the oldest and best preserved ancient fortifications in the world. Parts of it date back over 2,000 years. The Sassanid Persian Empire built much of what stands today in the 5th and 6th centuries, constructing it specifically to block the nomadic peoples of the northern steppes. When Arab armies conquered the region in the 7th century CE, they were so astonished by this wall that they immediately identified it as the barrier of Dhul-Qarnayn, the barrier of Gog and Magog. The identification has never been universally accepted, but it has never been conclusively rejected either. Then, there is the Gorgan Wall in modern-day Iran, over 200 kilometers long, built by the Sassanid Empire to block the same nomadic threat from the east. The largest ancient defensive wall ever found, after the Great Wall of China. And then there is the Great Wall of China itself. When medieval European and Islamic travelers first heard of the Great Wall, a wall so massive it seemed impossible, many immediately concluded they had found the barrier of Gog and Magog. Some Islamic geographers placed Gog and Magog in the Far East precisely because of the wall's existence. 3 walls, 3 continents, 3 civilizations all building the same thing, all trying to keep something out. The question is not whether the walls existed, they did. The question is what, or who, they were keeping out, and whether whatever it was is still out there. In the Middle Ages, maps were not just geographical tools, they were theological statements, cosmological visions, attempts to place humanity within the divine order of the universe. And on almost every major medieval map, Christian, Islamic, and Byzantine, in the far corners of the known world, beyond the edges of civilization, in the places where the mapmaker's knowledge ran out and imagination took over, there is a mark. And beside that mark, 2 words, Gog, Magog, the Mappa Mundi, the great medieval world map preserved in Hereford Cathedral in England, drawn around 1300 CE, places Gog and Magog in the far northeast of the world, enclosed behind a great wall, tiny figures of savage people imprisoned within their boundary, straining against the barrier that holds them back. The Ebstorf map, another extraordinary medieval world map, shows them similarly, wild, cannibalistic, monstrous, locked away at the edge of the world where no civilized person would ever venture. Islamic cartographers were equally specific. Al-Idrisi, the greatest Islamic geographer of the 12th century, placed Gog and Magog in the Far East. Ibn Khaldun, the brilliant 14th century historian, wrote extensively about them, treating them as real people who would genuinely emerge at the end of times. What is extraordinary about these maps is not their inaccuracy, it is their consistency. Christian cartographers in England, Islamic geographers in North Africa, Byzantine scholars in Constantinople, all placing Gog and Magog in roughly the same direction, the remote north and east, all describing them in roughly the same terms. A people beyond the wall, a people outside of civilization, a people waiting. Medieval cartographers were not fools. They were among the most educated people of their age. When they put Gog and Magog on their maps, they were not being superstitious. They were recording a fear so ancient, so universal, so deeply embedded in the human imagination that no map of the world felt complete without it. The fear that beyond the edges of what we know, something waits. Here is where the ancient mystery crashes into the modern world. Because Gog and Magog did not stay in the pages of ancient texts. They followed humanity into the modern age. And throughout history, almost every major military power has been identified by someone as Gog and Magog. The Romans identified the Huns, the terrifying nomadic warriors who swept out of Central Asia in the 4th century CE and nearly destroyed the Roman Empire, as Gog and Magog. When Attila the Hun's armies appeared on the horizon, Roman writers reached immediately for Ezekiel's prophecy. When the Mongol Empire exploded out of Central Asia in the 13th century, destroying everything in its path from China to Poland, the identification was immediate and universal. Christian Europe, the Islamic world, and the Byzantine Empire all simultaneously declared, "These are Gog and Magog." The prophecy is being fulfilled. Pope Innocent IV wrote letters identifying the Mongols as Gog and Magog. Islamic scholars said the same. Jewish communities across Europe and the Middle East prepared for the end of the world. The Mongols killed an estimated 40 million people, perhaps more. They destroyed cities that had stood for 1,000 years. They ended civilizations that had existed since antiquity. If that was not Gog and Magog, what would be? In more recent history, the identifications have continued. In the 19th and 20th centuries, various scholars identified Russia as Gog, pointing to Ezekiel's description of a power from the far north. Others identified Turkey. Others identified specific modern nations whose names they connected linguistically to ancient tribal names in Ezekiel's text. None of these identifications has achieved consensus, and perhaps that is the point. Perhaps Gog and Magog are not a specific people or a specific nation. Perhaps they are something larger, something that, as every generation recognizes, in the great destructive forces of their own time. The Huns, the Mongols, every empire that rose from the edges of the known world and threatened to consume everything civilization had built. Every age has its Gog and Magog, and every age has wondered, is this the one the prophets meant? 3 traditions, 3,000 years of scholarship, 3 continents of believers. They disagree on almost everything about Gog and Magog, who they are, where they come from, what the wall is made of, where it stands. But on one thing, they all agree. The barrier will not hold forever. In the biblical tradition, Gog's invasion comes at a time of false peace, when the world believes it is finally safe, when civilization has lowered its guard. The attack is sudden, overwhelming, and seemingly unstoppable. Only divine intervention saves the day. In the Islamic tradition, the Quran is explicit. The barrier of Dhul-Qarnayn is a mercy, not a permanent solution. When the promise of Allah comes, it will be demolished. Gog and Magog will pour out, and nothing human will stop them. Only a divine act ends their rampage. In the Greek and later Christian tradition, Alexander's Iron Gate holds, but not forever. Medieval legends describe Gog and Magog slowly, patiently, impossibly slowly, licking the iron wall. Every day they lick and the wall grows thinner, and one day it will be thin enough to break. Every single day, for thousands of years, licking an iron wall. The image is almost unbearably patient, almost unbearably terrifying. What kind of enemy waits thousands of years? What kind of enemy is so certain of its eventual victory that it simply waits? Islamic hadith, the recorded sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, describe the release of Gog and Magog as one of the major signs of the Day of Judgment, along with the rising of the sun from the west, the appearance of the Dajjal, the Antichrist, the descent of Jesus from heaven. These are the final events, the last chapters of human history, and Gog and Magog are in every version of that final chapter. The Bible, the Quran, the legends of Alexander. 3 of the greatest civilizations humanity has ever produced, all telling the same story, all pointing to the same ending. Whether you read these as literal prophecy, as historical allegory, or as symbolic representations of the eternal struggle between civilization and chaos, the message is consistent across 3,000 years of human thought. There is something beyond the wall, and the wall will not stand forever. We began this journey with a question: who or what are Gog and Magog? And after traveling through 3,000 years of history, through the visions of Hebrew prophets and the conquests of Greek kings, through the sacred verses of the Quran and the trembling ink of medieval mapmakers, we find ourselves standing before the same wall we started with, the wall of mystery, the wall of the unknown. We have not found the barrier of Dhul-Qarnayn. We have not identified Gog beyond all doubt. We have not located Magog on a modern map with certainty. But we have found something perhaps more remarkable. We have found that the fear is universal, in every age, in every culture, in every tradition that has grappled with the deepest questions of human existence. There is an awareness of something beyond the edges of the known world, something that civilization has not yet faced, something that waits. The ancient Hebrews felt it and called it Gog of Magog. The Greeks felt it and built iron gates against it. The Islamic tradition felt it and described a barrier of copper and iron that a righteous king built at the edge of the world. Medieval cartographers felt it and painted it at the corners of their maps, where the known world ended and the unknown began. And perhaps, if we are honest with ourselves, we still feel it today, because the wall is still there, whatever form it takes in our age, the boundary between order and chaos, between civilization and its undoing, between the world we have built and the forces that could unmake it. And the ancient texts all agree on one final thing. One day, the wall comes down. What happens then has been the subject of prophecy, prayer, and dread for 3,000 years. The mystery of Gog and Magog is not a relic of the ancient world. It is a mirror. And in that mirror, if we look carefully enough, we see not monsters from the distant past. We see ourselves, our fears, our certainty that somewhere beyond the edge of what we know, something waits, something patient, something that has all the time in the world. Thank you for watching. If this story stayed with you, if that image of something licking an iron wall in the darkness refused to leave your mind, then you understand why this mystery has survived 3,000 years. Some questions are not meant to be answered. They are meant to be remembered.